Hello people of the future and welcome to Let's Make a Trading Card Game. We've been hard at work preparing the Kickstarter for Multiverse Cosmic Conquest, and we have finally launched it. So if you haven't already, back us on Kickstarter, the link is in the description. We have a lot of interesting rewards for all of the different tiers of pledges. So yeah, we've worked really hard on the Kickstarter, video page, all of that, and we need your help now more than ever. So please support us on Kickstarter. Now, with that out of the way, I wanted to give you a brief update on what we've been working on behind the scenes, because we haven't been posting many updates before we launched the Kickstarter. We have been working on the multiplayer version of Multiverse Cosmic Conquest, both free-for-alls and team games. We have, obviously, if you have watched the video, the Kickstarter video, you know that we have added a lot of new artwork on the cards. We have created the front of the card, and we have, what else? We have changed some of the terminology in the cards, fixed up some of the wording, the weird wonky wording that was left there from previous times. We have updated the rules a little bit, and yeah, a lot of stuff has been going on, so let's talk about it one thing at a time. So first of all, multiplayer. In trading card games, if you want to have a multiplayer variant, it will generally have longer games, just simply due to the fact that there are more people playing. Plus, if it's a turn-based game, which most trading card games are, that can lead to longer waiting times for each player. If, for example, in your game you're only allowed to play cards on your turn, you do so on your turn and you have to wait for your opponent to play. But if you have 4 or 5 players playing at the same time, you have to wait for the other 3, 4, however many players are playing to have their turn. This can become quite boring. If you're playing with 6 players, you do your thing and then you wait for the other 5 players to have your turn. That's not too good. So that's, obviously we thought about this before, and that's why we added instant action for more interaction between the players. This is, I'm going way back when we added instant actions. But you can add them in different ways. If you don't know, instant actions are actions that you can play on your opponent's turn, but you can only play them if they are doing something directly to you, if they are about to conquer a space of yours, or if they are attacking something of yours. Then you can respond by playing an instant action. Why did I set this up in this way? Well, it becomes pretty obvious when you analyze a 6-player game, for example. If any player can respond to any action playing their instant action, let's just assume that for a moment. That means that every time any player does anything, so in Multiverse, if, for example, I move something onto an opponent's space, all of the other 5 players have a chance to respond. And this slows down the game immensely. Imagine, I'm attacking you. Okay, do you have a response? Let me see. No. What about you? No. You have nothing? Okay. What about you? Yes, I will. Okay, now, this guy has played an instant action. Do any other players have responses? And this obviously makes the game much more start and stop, and everything a player does has to be approved by a committee, basically. So the way that we design instant actions works especially well in multiplayer games, because it lets you relax while your opponents are battling between each other and you don't have anything to do. But at the same time, it gives you an opportunity to respond when something is happening directly to you. And it really forces you to pay attention a little bit, especially when your opponents are starting to move into your territory, which is perfectly fine. So this version of the instant actions adds interactability, if that's a word, between the players, but doesn't add too much wait time. So that's one thing that we worked on for multiplayer, but that's a long time ago. Another thing, this is more specific to Multiverse, in multiplayer games, the galaxy you play on is bigger. So naturally, since the way you win a game in multiverse is by conquering the galaxy, either by conquering your opponent's home planet or conquering more than half of the spaces in the galaxy, adding more players and more spaces makes the game that much longer, because by winning in the direct strategy, where you have to conquer your opponent's home planet, you have to conquer each and every opponent's home planet. Or, like, I can conquer yours, you can the other player can conquer this player, and in the end only one player is standing. You could change the rules by saying the first person that loses the game and everybody else wins, but that's usually not how free-for-alls work. Usually there's just one winner. So by adding a lot more obstacles and a lot more spaces, the game drags on even more. So we had to find a way to make games last shorter. So we have added a few rules that are specific to multiplayer variants, which are: if I conquer an opponent's home planet, I also gain control of all of their spaces, capture all of their ships and all of their resource, thereby making me a much bigger threat to the other players. And sometimes by destroying one player, you win the game by conquering half of the galaxy. So after adding these rules, we've started playing and playtesting 3, 4, 5, and 6 player games. And in 3 player, this worked really well. But once you started getting into 4, and especially 5 and 6 player games with really big galaxies, that really wasn't enough to make the game as engaging as I wanted to, and as dynamic as I wanted to. And it really started to drag on. So I started thinking, and there can be different ways of fixing a problem like this. One, obviously, is changing the rules, which I already did. I could even expand that further, but then it would mean that different versions of multiplayer have different rules, which adds a lot more complexity in the rules department. Not the best solution. Another solution is to change the actual arsenal cards, but that obviously has ripple effects. So if you change the speed of certain cards so that the game goes faster in multiplayer, it means that in 1v1 the game goes really, really fast, and that's not good as well. Another solution to this problem would be to shrink the sizes of the galaxies. So 6 players would play on a 4-player galaxy, and 4 players would play on a 2-player galaxy. But that sort of defeats the purpose of having a galaxy that's fully customizable, and it really makes it not really fully customizable if you can only play in certain small galaxies. You cannot really expand infinitely. So I started thinking, and then I realized that I could add a galaxy card that would make all of the objects on the galaxy closer effectively. And that's why we added the wormhole, which you should be seeing right now on the screen. And what the wormhole does, it's a galaxy card, and it lets your objects move from one wormhole to another one. Obviously, both cards need to be explored by any player. And the card that does this movement cannot move again this turn. It's not like it's an extra movement. That is the movement that that card will do in that turn. So, how powerful is this card? With this wording and with this rule set, it's actually not that powerful in 2-player. In fact, it's usually not good, which is perfect because we want to have a card that is good in multiplayer and not good in 2-player, so that it doesn't affect 2-player balance and affects only multiplayer games. Obviously, it's that more powerful in bigger galaxies because it lets you leap way further with your ships and other objects that can move. Now, something like this on in a game where the goal of the game is conquer the galaxy, or in two different ways, conquering your opponent's home planet or conquering 10 spaces in the galaxy, you would think that an effect like this would be overpowered. Let me explain why it's not. It's a galaxy card, so that means that any player can add them to their galaxy deck, and while the game is going on, any player can use these wormholes. Third, you need at least 2 of them to be explored at the same time, so you cannot do that too early in the game, because if you only explore one, then you can't really move from one to another because the other isn't explored yet. So that means that either both players or a few players have started exploring already, or it means that you have explored a lot and can move between the places that you have explored. So it's really not that big of a deal, especially in 2-player games. But it helps a lot with interactability, I'm using that word again, in large galaxies. And it interconnects, I'm just inventing words now, interconnects spaces much more. So it lets you be closer to different parts of the galaxy at the same time. And it makes the whole experience much more energetic and much more dynamic, which is exactly what we were looking for. The final wording that we came up with Wormhole is objects can move from one wormhole to another, and then open brackets, this counts as their movement for the turn. Only objects that could normally move can do so, close brackets. It took me a while to come up with this wording. In fact, I had a lot of different ideas on how to word an effect like this, and let me just read them out loud, because this is also important. Wording and readability in cards is key for players to understand what the card does. Objects can move from wormhole to wormhole as if they were in range 1 of each other. So this technically, at least I understood what the card does, but we've had some complaints from our playtesters. They misinterpreted the card, and we don't want anybody misinterpreting the card. We want, when you write the effect on a card, it needs to be as clear as day, and it needs to follow the terminology of the game, and it needs to be as unambiguous as possible. It can be represented only in one type of effect or ability or gameplay, whatever thing. It can be only interpreted in one way. The way it was interpreted by players was that as if they were in range 1 of each other, people understood it as, if my ship has range 2, it can move onto a wormhole and then from there to another wormhole with one movement, because I can move, if something has range 2, it can move on to something in range 2, and one range is, do you understand what I'm saying? The range between one wormhole and the other is 1, so I can add that to another one, and no, that's not how the wormhole does, because that would be way too overpowered and abusable. We don't want that. So we had to find another wording that would work. There were a few other objects on wormhole, instead of moving normally, can move to another wormhole. This counts as their movement for the turn. So technically this works, but it's way too long, and you have to read into the wording and try to understand what the card means. It's not as intuitive and not as self-explanatory, definitely. So we could have kept that wording, but honestly, it just wouldn't fit on the card, and that's another big problem and another big thing that you need to think about when designing effects for your cards, because you have only so much space on where to store the text. So then I thought, what would be the ideal wording for such a card? And obviously, in a perfect world, the card would just say, objects can move from one wormhole to another, and that's it. And that would work with the rules, and that would mean that the card would work only in that way. So essentially, I made that the wording of the card, and then tweaked a few of the definitions of what movements are and how things move in the rules, which made the card so clean as it was. Now, in order for people not to misinterpret that simple sentence, I had to add a few clarifications within the brackets, and that's how we came up with this wording. Now, talking about wording, during this long period of playtesting, we've been playtesting a lot, even with our playtesters, our fans, as well as internally on Octagon, and we have noticed that the wording on the cards can be a bit wonky. So in order to simplify the text on the cards, I had to change a bit of the terminology without changing anything in the rules. I'm just changing words, replacing words, so that the text on the cards reads better. So the effect of Galactic Alliance, which used to be written as gain control of all planets under no player's control, which, I mean, I understand how that works, and people who have read the rules extensively know how that works, but it's really wonky, and it's just a juggling of words, which obviously can be written a lot better if just the terms were different. So that's what I did. I changed the terms. If something is under your control, you now say it's allied. So an allied planet, or all allied ships get +1 power, stuff like that. If something is under your opponent's control, it's enemy. So destroy enemy unit. And if something is under no player's control, like for example unexplored spaces and explored spaces that aren't conquered yet, those are neutral. There were a few more changes done. So for example, gaining control of a space is now conquering a space. Conquering was still used previously, but only when you would conquer something from your opponent. Now it's just when you gain control of it, even if it was neutral before you conquered it, or under no player's control. So that's how conquering works now, and capturing is the same thing. You capture a ship, capture resource, even if it was neutral before that. Okay, so now the same card reads conquer all neutral planets, which is way, way cleaner, and once you know what neutral is and what conquer means, but even if you don't, you can piggyback off of the actual meaning of the words without getting too caught up in the rules and understand how the card works, which is another great thing that game designers need to do more often, piggyback off of players' knowledge and intuition of how words work and what they mean. So now all of the text on cards is much more readable, and actually is shorter now because of the simplified and shortened terms. And I think that's it for this video. Next time I will talk about the artwork creation process. I think I said in a previous video that I would talk about that next time, but I will talk about that next time for real. And I will talk about the front of the card and the design of the front of the card. So thanks everybody for watching. Support us on Kickstarter. We really, really need your support. Back us and share this video and share the Kickstarter page and those videos to all of your friends who are fans of trading card games and fans of game design in general, because we need as much exposure as possible, and we need the funds to continue development of Multiverse and create the online version. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Until next time, keep it up.